Hi, welcome to KJ and Tony Move to France. In today's video, we're sharing with you 10 things that we think you need to know before you move to France.
As you know, we moved to France in November of 2022, and we knew some of the things on this list. Others we didn't know. So we're going to talk about the 10 most important things you should know before you go to France. Number one is learning a little bit of French. You don't have to be fluent, but you have to be able to say things like bonjour, bonsoir, and be gracious when you're asking for help and not be the person who expects everybody to speak English.
And I think that this is a misunderstanding by some of our viewers. Some of our viewers thought that we did not know any French before we moved to France, and that's simply not true. We didn't know a lot of French. We only knew un peu, which is a little French, but we tried the best that we could to communicate with the people in the restaurants and the stores that we went to, because we know how far that really goes, how much they appreciate that in France when you at least try, when you just attempt the basic niceties. You'll find that when you go into stores or restaurants or any place of business, anywhere, that if you don't say bonjour, they're very polite in France. So it's very important to them that you are polite. So whenever you go into a store, you'll notice if you do not say bonjour, that someone will ultimately say to you, and most likely in a raised tone, bonjour, because they're expecting you to say hello. They're expecting you to say au revoir when you leave. So just knowing a few basic phrases will really help.
And to correct another misconception about our stay there, we had no issues at all with getting along with any French people. In fact, I made it a point for me personally to be as gracious as I could be, because I was treading on their territory, not them on mine. So how could I be anything but gracious?
Absolutely. Number 2 is about making friends and getting integrated into the culture. The French are known for staying within their own social circles, and so it's kind of hard to break in and meet people, especially if you don't know anyone in France. So you're moving to France and you don't have any relatives, or you don't know anyone already that's living there. I would recommend that you join an expat group, or you join some sort of activity, like a group that meets to play sports if that's something that you enjoy doing, or a cultural group, like maybe if you love museums, that you join a group attached to the museum, or music, or something that you enjoy. That's one thing that I regret that we didn't do, is that we didn't join an expat group. We didn't really take the time to join any group, because I knew we were going to be moving around a lot. But that's something that I wish we had done, because I think it does make a huge difference, especially when you're experiencing homesickness or you're feeling maybe a little isolated, that you have friends that you can lean on for support and go out and do things with.
Okay, number 3 is related to dining etiquette. And in France, a lot revolves around eating and restaurants and that sort of thing. And you may not have ever noticed this, but most Americans use knife and fork, and they cut their food up, and then they switch hands. And they'll take the fork from their left hand and put it in their right hand and then eat. In Europe, particularly in France, they don't do that. They cut up the food and they just continue to go from there, and they eat it, and they don't switch hands. So that's a little dining etiquette that I didn't even know about.
And number 4 flows directly from number 3, in that the French also eat a lot later than we do here in America. And this flows from a myth, actually a myth that we bought into when we first moved there, because we noticed that a lot of business establishments close right after lunch and until dinner. So usually they'll close at like 2 or 3 o'clock, and then they'll open again at 7 p.m. Generally, most restaurants And some other businesses do not open again until 7 p.m. Like that's the earliest time that they eat dinner. But we thought that this was based upon the fact that the culture there, they're so much more laid back and they're very into self-care. And although that may be true in some circumstances, for the most part, from what I've read and learned, is that most workers in France, even though it says that they typically have a 35-hour work week, that's not necessarily true. It's one of those myths that people believe, that most workers work from anywhere from like 8:30 or 9 in the morning until 6:30 or 7 at night, which is, I guess, common in some businesses in the US, but most people are going to eat around between the hours of 5 to 7, maybe 5 to 8 here in the US, but not starting dinner at 7. Most
Sure.
French people, because they don't get off of work until 6:30, they don't eat until at least 7 p.m., if not often later, like 8:30. So that's something that's important to know, because restaurants will not open in the evening typically until the earliest 7 p.m.
Number 5 is about arts and literature. Arts and literature is a very important part of France. There are many artists, writers, and musicians who come from France or have moved to France to hone their craft.
One of our favorite aspects of France, Paris in particular, but you experienced this in Nice and other areas of France, is the amount of street performers that you'll encounter. There are musicians everywhere. It's not uncommon that you'll find a person with a piano playing in the middle of the street somewhere, or someone with a saxophone, or someone just singing on the side of the road. It's really incredible the amount of street performances that there are. I would say like at least every weekend, if not many times during the week, we would go out and we would see the accordion player on the Seine, or someone playing the piano, or someone rollerblading and providing a performance
Sure.
for the crowd.
Or a Michael Jackson impersonator in Nice.
Or a full-blown band
Right.
somewhere.
Right. I remember in front of Louis Vuitton, there was like a 13-piece band.
13-piece band and another like church choir / band that we
Yeah.
saw on the side of the road. It's just everywhere in France, and it's something we really, really love.
And you didn't experience this, but in Nice, it's actually perhaps even more prevalent than Paris, in that it's almost like they're fighting for turf, as to everybody has their own little stage, and along the waterfront there, that walkway has 4 or 5 along a half a mile road.
Yeah,
So
I can't wait to see it.
yeah, it's great. It's really cool.
Number 6. Number 6 is to be aware that if you move to France, when you move to France, you're going to experience a lot of protesting. The French are very well known for their protesting, to the extent that we would experience the police sirens, that very typical, French police siren, and see what would you call it? Not motorcade, but you would see the
6 or 7 in a row.
trucks,
Yeah.
the military trucks going by, and it's something that we definitely got used to over time, to the extent that the police sirens almost become like white noise in the
Sure.
background, because they're so common. So it's just something to be aware of, that it's very typical.
It's part of normal life there, and it's almost like protesting is a national sport.
And it's never been anything that's been scary or
No,
dangerous. They're again, the French are very polite people.
Yeah.
Even when they protest, I think that they are much more, dare I say, polite than Americans who
And
protest.
I think that the things that you've seen on TV recently about the protesting, I think really have blown up what's really going on.
Yeah.
Because we saw protests. Remember, we saw it at the Arc de Triomphe, and it was no big deal at all. So it's just something that becomes part of your everyday knowledge.
Yeah, it's a part of the culture. It's part of life, especially living life in France.
Sure.
Moving on to number 7.
Number 7 has to do with renting a house or an apartment. It can be more difficult in France than buying a house. You're going to have to provide a lot of documentation.
Mm-hmm. So be prepared to provide things like your passport, your visa. Sometimes people may ask for a marriage certificate. You'll have to provide most likely 3 years potentially of tax returns. They'll request possibly bank statements. They'll want to know the type of cash and assets and perhaps other property that you have.
They're going to want you to have a French bank account, right?
French bank account is huge. It's another sort of complication in terms of you have to have a guarantor, so to speak, or you have to have some sort of lease agreement that you can provide to the bank in order to get the bank account in and of itself. There are ways in which you can get around all of these requirements for renting an apartment. And what we were able to do, or almost did, I should say, because we left France right before this happened, is we had agreed to pay for the apartment for the entire year in advance so that we wouldn't have to go through providing all of this documentation. So you can, they do require your passport and or your visa because they want to know that you are allowed to be in the country. But rather than having to provide the tax returns and the bank accounts and all of that, we were able to say, listen, we'll give you the whole year in advance for the rent. And they came back and said yes, that they would agree to that. So,
and you may not be able to do that, right? And if you're not able to do that, getting a bank account is very important. It kind of legitimizes you in the country of France to have a bank account. So that's something you might want to start working on as soon as you can.
And then number 8, which is relative to the apartment especially, is the fact that most of the older buildings in France are not going to have elevators. This is something we clearly, if you've watched our previous videos, were not aware of when we moved to France. I don't know why, we just didn't think. And I truly believe that it's because the previous 2 times we were there, we were in an older building and it had an elevator. Each time we had been to France, there had been elevators. We had never been in a building that didn't have an elevator. So we were just...
The moment we found out we didn't have an elevator, I thought to myself, I can't live here.
Yeah.
But we overcame it pretty quickly.
We did.
Once you've done it a few times, it's really not a big deal.
Right.
But especially if you know that there's not going to be elevators in most buildings.
And that in and of itself was not the cause of us coming back, or I should say me coming back and then you coming back after I returned to the US. If it was just my knee and the elevator issue, that in and of itself I could have overcome. It was the combination of getting sick and the knee and everything else.
I think that apartment that we were about to rent had an elevator.
It did have an elevator. So, we made sure that it had an elevator.
At that point, we knew better.
Yeah.
Okay, number 9 has to do with French law. French law is very secular. They separate church and state very strictly. In fact, they don't allow any religious symbols in public places or schools. So you have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that they are very strict about that.
Yeah.
So to make sure that you are aware. So number 10, we saved for last because this is one that I think attracts a lot of people to Europe, in particular France, and that's the healthcare, the fact that it's universal healthcare that is free and is available to everyone.
And when you go there right from the beginning and you get, let's say, a long stay visa, you have to get insurance. You have to pay for insurance for that first year. We paid for the first year, and in our 4th month there, I was to be interviewed and have a physical taken to see if I was going to qualify for this. And so once you've qualified for it and you have a permanent visa, then you're eligible for it. And it's 100% free.
But one way that it is similar to the US, and even though we've heard from many people that it's much better than US health insurance, one way that it's similar is that you will have co-pays, and there are some doctors and some procedures that the cost is above and beyond what is covered by the universal healthcare system. And so you may want to purchase additional insurance, additional private insurance to cover some of those additional fees that
something we would call here gap insurance. But you know, the people that we've talked to, those extra fees or co-pays are generally very small. There's no time when it's a gigantic copay.
Right. It's generally small. And so there's a video that you also might find helpful that is by International Living that covers information relative to the healthcare system in France. It's super helpful. It was super helpful for me. So I'm going to link that in the description along with an article that covers 23 things that you need to know before you move to France. So we're covering 10 here. They cover 13 more, and there's links to all sorts of resources within that article that you might find super helpful.
And I'm going to add number 11 right now. Get a subscription to International Living. It is very informative no matter where you want to live in the world, but every single month they have something on a European country. France is often featured.
And we do not receive any commission on that, by the way. We just simply love the resource. We love the magazine, and we get emails constantly, and we get magazines in the mail, and it's been really invaluable for us and just super helpful. And I'd like to add actually a number 12.
Oh, no.
Number 12 is
Adrienne Leeds. She's an expat that's been in Paris and Nice for over 25 years.
real estate expert.
Real estate expert and expat expert, and finance for people that are Americans coming to France expert. And she's somebody who's terrific at helping you to find the home for your future living in France.
Or apartment. So she helps with short-term rentals, long-term rentals, and purchases. They do a lot of the footwork for you. So we're also going to put a link to her website in our description. So definitely go and check her out. And that's it for our recommendations on what you need to know before you move to France.
So our top 10 is actually 12.
So thanks so much for joining us for the video today.
And don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button.
And we'll see you again next time. A biento.
Bye.
Thank you.